It is time for Unit Tier List 4.0. This is my fourth Maddening unit tier list. I'm approaching 1,000 hours of playtime if I'm not at that already. So I'm going to evaluate the units based on how good they are in base game Maddening. And for the DLC units, I guess I can evaluate them based on how good they are. So let me just organize some of these units really quick. So here are the DLC units. So the DLC ones, obviously, when you're running the DLC units, you will generally be using the DLC, but you could run them, you could beat the Xenolog and run them on base game. So I guess I can evaluate them on base game. So, all right, so let's begin. So Alir, I do think Alir is S tier. There's basically like two modes of Alir. There's the invest in Alir a ton early with Mercurius route, which is pretty easy to do because you start with Marth. So there's that. And then there's the support Alir that is a bondage shield unit. So either way, both of those builds are S tier. So either you're a damage carry or you're like a support utility that boosts like allies' damage, reduces their damage, and you have supports with everyone. So when you bondage shield, you're guaranteed to have huge avoid rates and not be targeted by enemies. Enemies will not target you if they cannot hit you or if they're easier targets to hit. If they can one-shot you, they might target you. If they can hit you, even if it's like low percent. But as long as you avoid stack, you can, for low investment, like little XP funneled into Alir, you can just become a support unit. So either way, Alir is a really solid unit. Like arguably the best bonder in the game because Alir has supports with everyone. So, but if you want to use them as a damage carry, they're pretty strong as well. They have pretty good speed, pretty good strength, decent build. Not like the best build, but it's good enough to double with most things. So definitely S tier. All right, Vander. Unfortunately, I know that someone donated on my stream to make a Vander Constitution, but in the actual main game without DLC, he just has a very high internal level, and it just takes him forever to level up. Now, early game, he can help you set up kills, so that way he doesn't take away XP from your main units. But if you want to use him long term, unfortunately, I think his internal level is like 20. So he's not going to start actually leveling up until like chapter 15 plus, maybe even later. So it's just hard for him to level up. They should have made his internal level like 10 or 12 or something. Maybe even like, I think 10 would have been fine. But unfortunately, his internal level is really what holds him back. Otherwise, he could be potentially like a B or a C tier. Clan. I feel like Clan is here. He has a rocky start. He has a very bad start. He starts out at level 1. He's also like Anna, he's on the wrong class in a way, but he can't really make Sage work that well in base game. He just kind of has he's on the wrong class. He's too low level. Every time I try to invest in Clan and have him like get as much XP as Alir and Chloe, he always ends up falling behind because he just doesn't have the kill potential. His magic stat is low, and he basically needs to be second sealed into physical, but it doesn't seem to be that worthwhile to do so. There are way better options. Like one of the main problems with this game is the middle game units are just so good that unless an early game unit really pops off consistently across playthroughs, it's not really worth it bringing them into the middle game unless you like them. And that's kind of where Clan is at. All right, Fram, I do think is S tier. So if you're running Alir as a damage carry, even if you're not, Fram is a free staff bot with Chain Guard. So even if you're not, like if Alir is your bondage shield unit, Fram can still just be a staff bot utility Chain Guarder. Chain Guard on Maddening mode is really useful. It allows you to tank enemy hits, and it allows you to enemy phase very effectively. So let's say a unit can tank 2 enemies, but there's a third one. You can now tank those 3 enemies, and then enemy phase all of them. And the way enemies attack, this is something no one really talks about. The way enemies attack, they prioritize breaking and then following up. So let's say you have a lance unit. Like let's say you have like a Tamara or something that's enemy phasing, and there's an axe enemy and then 2 sword enemies. The axe enemy will always go first to break so that he gets a hit in, breaks, she doesn't counterattack, and then a sword enemy hits, and then she doesn't counterattack for 2 turns. If you chain guard, the axe enemy's attack will get chain guarded, she won't get broken, and she'll counterattack 2 more enemies. So chain guard is actually insanely useful unless you're doing like LTC stuff. So even if you're just using her as a chain guarding bonded or a chain guarding staff bot, she can obstruct, she can heal, she can restore, she can warp, physic, rescue, whatever you need her to do. Even if you're just using her in that capacity, she's a free staff unit, and she's like your first staff unit, and all the XP she generates is outside of combat, so it doesn't take away any XP from anyone else because your units are going to be getting hit. Chain Guard is free XP, and she's just free XP. Now, if you want to use her as your bonded shield unit, you want Alir to be on like Wyvern or some kind of combat class, she can be your Lucina bonded shield unit. She has supports with Kagetsu, Chloe, Alir, and a few other good units. So she can bond, and Anna. So she can bond those units and they can hard carry. And then she can just avoid stack. Especially with Alir, she gives Alir and herself plus 10 avoid just by being next to them. So one thing that's nice about her is if she avoid stacks and Alir avoid stacks, you can get a lot of value out of just chain guards, because if enemies miss, it doesn't consume chain guard. It also doesn't give you XP, but it's like a get out of jail free card just in case they do hit. So if you're at like 30% incoming hit rates and you keep dodging, eventually when you do get hit, she'll just nullify the hit. So, all right, so I think she's S tier. Alfred, I think is C tier, to be honest. His accuracy's bad. His bases are low. His growths are good though. But he's like a work. It takes a lot to get him going. And it's generally not worth it because he doesn't have like some amazing build that pops off. His bases just aren't high enough to justify running him over other units. And he has like low speed, like medium strength, and low accuracy, all of which make him kind of like a hard to use unit. He tends to be like a similar level of accuracy to Boucheron long term, and I just don't think he's worth investing in. Now, Boucheron, I almost want to put him in A tier. I feel like he's like high B tier, low A tier. I'll put him in high B tier. I do think him on Wyvern is pretty solid. He needs like damage fixing. Like he needs to be on Axe Wyvern, and he has the build to use it. But because the Hero's Axe exists, many units that just have like 9 build can run axes, like axe power with the Hero's Axe and benefit without it slowing them down. So his unique thing of running axes without it impeding his speed while having high speed and lower strength kind of gets nullified by that weapon's existence. Now, if you're not using those weapons, he could use like a Silver Axe, but it's expensive to upgrade. But that is something he could use. He could potentially double on Silver Axe. He could quad on Brave Axe. Now, quadding on Brave Axe might be good for him, but I've been finding that his speed is like just like it's high, but it's not as high as like Chloe, Kagetsu, or like Anna or something. His speed is good, but I feel like it's not that high. All right, so Etier. I feel like Etier is like here. She has a lot of problems. Like her main problem is that she's just statistically outclassed by other things that want to be on Warrior. Like a lot of other things. The other thing that she has that's working against her is she's an early game unit, so that means she's fighting for XP. This is something that people that promote Etier don't really like to talk about. You have to feed her XP, and if you just use her as like an average combat unit that shoots down flyers and maybe last hits some enemies, like up until the point you get Alchrist, she will generally be like level 6 to 7. This is without DLC. So by the time you get Alchrist, she has like the same strength as him, and he just has better stats otherwise. And that has to be addressed, right? Like even if she can pop off long term as like some kind of warrior build, there are other warriors that have higher strength for free. And she's basically just eclipsed by Amber, who just has higher strength than her and the same stats otherwise. And he's a little bit more bulky. And he has better build, and he has a better passive. So she's just kind of statistically outclassed by a lot of units. And she has no niche, and her passive's bad. So, what can you do? Saline, I think, is like high B tier. She tends to be too slow to consistently double on Levin Sword. Her speed is like medium. It's not high. And her build is low, and she has no build growth. So she's stuck at like 5 build on Vidam, and she has a hard time doubling things for the most part. She might actually be best off on Mage Knight, but even so, like the speed increase and the +1 build on Mage Knight plus Chaos Style, I think she's still having trouble. Like she's gonna have trouble doubling, and that's always gonna be a problem she has. She's not naturally very fast. Naturally fast units still need speed +5 and speed taker to double most things consistently, so kind of a rough situation. All right, Louis, I think he's like high C tier. He has speed problems and he has res problems. Now you can make him into a general hard carry. You could also probably put him on Halberdier to take advantage of his 40% strength and decent strength. That's probably his best class, but even then, like, his speed isn't going to be that high. Like, anything that attacks him is going to double him, and anything he pincer attacks would double him on counterattack. So if he doesn't kill it, he's taking a lot of incoming damage. He does have high defensive growth, but his res growth is bad, and his speed is quite low. Chloe, I would say, is like here. She's definitely S tier. She can easily pop off on Wyvern, Griffin Knight, or Mage Knight. She basically can do any physical or magical thing for the most part. She has 35% magic and 25% strength growth. So any class, so like Wyvern gets her, like she's 55% speed. So Wyvern gets her to 45% strength and then 60% speed. And her base speed is high and her base strength is okay. But by the time you get units like Kagetsu, she will be relevant and she'll be on Wyvern well before Kagetsu. And she'll be consistently one-rounding things throughout your entire run pretty easily. And then if you want her to scale better into the end game, you can just run Lance Power with speed +5 or Speed Taker, and she doesn't even need like an Engage ring. She can pop off on a Bond ring. All right, so Diamant, I would say he's like here. He's kind of slow. He might be B tier, but my problem with Diamant is by the time I get him, I feel like I don't need him. And he feels like an Alir with more build and worse speed because he's like a sword unit starting out. Now he has an interesting passive that could allow him to enemy phase by healing. So if he was on like Ike or something and he kept like counterattacking, let's say he counterattacks like 5 enemies, he eventually will trigger his passive because you can get it to like 25% pretty consistently. So he could trigger his passive and like heal, but some other units would just take like 1 to 2 damage and just tank it and not need to heal. So it's debatable as to how good he actually is, but every time I try using him, it never works out. And he feels like he has like medium speed. He has decent build and medium speed. So maybe if I run him on something faster, he's better. But in my experience, he just never really pops off. Funny enough, Amber is actually pretty good. Putting Amber at A tier. All right, Amber has very high base strength. And if you run him on Warrior, as soon as you get him, you second seal him, you master seal him onto Paladin, second seal him into Warrior, he can get to Panette's base strength as you get her. So I was able to get him on fixed mode, and without overfeeding him either, just by like having him get a bunch of kills alongside Chloe and Alir. So he was able to get to Panette's 24 base strength on Warrior by chapter 13, which is pretty good because he has a hit +20 passive, and on Warrior you can use bows, and his passive triggers as long as nothing is near, like adjacent to him or the enemy. So he can consistently shoot things with good accuracy to some degree. Now he still has like kind of low base accuracy, but it's not that much lower than Panette. So he has like maybe -10 hit compared to her. So that kind of makes up for itself in a way, but he's definitely not as good as Panette. But he's like low A tier. Right now he's the only A tier, so I'll put him there. Jade? I actually think Jade is A tier. This is coming like really out of left field, but hear me out. All right, so I've been running a Jade General build, and she has like good enough stats where she can tank things and she can actually contribute and one-shot things on Silver Great Axe. So she one-shots things with Silver Great Axe on enemy phase, and then she can one-shot enemy mages with Tomahawk. Now you can run Axe Power, and I'm going to unlock Gentility on her. So she also has much higher res than Louis. This is why I put her up higher. And when I first played this game, I immediately noticed she was better at dealing with mages than Louis. She actually gets res level ups more consistently. Her passive helps mitigate res, incoming magic damage. Now his passive also does mitigate magic damage, but hers, as long as she's enemy phasing and waiting, she just takes less damage from mages. But she can one-shot Tomahawk with Lucina engraving for accuracy, and then I use Byleth engraving on Silver Great Axe +3. She one-shots most enemies, and as she gets Axe Power 5, which I am using her as like a hard carry enemy phase tank. So she along with a few other units using tier 4 well will have sword, lance, axe, power 5. It's not that hard to get. You just have to tier 4 well every single time, and you'll get there. She can one-shot things pretty easily. So, and she can also initiate with mages and just throw a tomahawk and kill them in a single hit, which is very good. So, and when she does get hit with magic, she is on Ike, so she can tank. She can actually tank magic very easily. She has, like, she takes, like, 7 to 8 less damage than Louis because of her res difference on enemy phase or player phase from magic. So she just is way more tanky because you're getting doubled as an armor. So both of them get doubled, but the difference is her res makes it so she's more flexible just in case a mage does get through. Just in case you do have to tank magic, she has a little bit more res to work with, so she takes substantially less damage than him. But I do think she's actually pretty solid. And I've been running her in a Maddening run. It's been working out. The well changes everything because it boosts these units up. But, I mean, arguably you could say he's like B tier, I guess. Well, I'll reevaluate some of these. Maybe these move up. I don't know. Alchrist, I think he's low B tier. I think she's like mid C tier. So I think he's actually decent because he can player phase nuke pretty consistently, but he can't enemy phase. If he could enemy phase, that gets him an A tier. But because he's generally going to be an archer, he's going to just be player phase shooting things down. He has better accuracy and a better passive, better build, better speed than Etier. And for 0 investment, like out of the box, he's just a better unit and even has like higher strength than her, assuming she levels up, 2 to 3 times by the time you get him. His strength actually will be higher for the most part. And even if you put him on warrior, he can get strength +3 when something gets attacked within 2 spaces on his team, which puts him at her strength level if she's the same level. So kind of questionable, like the people that promote her but like push him down. But he like if you just want to use him as a dude that shoots down archer or shoots down flyers, he could be good at that. So he can also one round with Brave Bow and like Lunar Brace and stuff like this pretty consistently. He needs some speed fixing though, like speed +5 or Speed Taker, and then Lunar Brace is a passive, and then whatever Emblem Ring you want to run on him. But yeah, I don't recommend running Lyn on either of these. I think Lyn should be on a bonded target, to be honest, for enemy phasing, assuming you're not LTCing. All right, Lapis, I think she's high A tier. I don't think she's quite S, but she's like A+ tier if there was an A+ tier. She's very similar to Chloe, and if you put her on Wyvern immediately, she pops off, and she'll be one-rounding things right alongside Chloe on lances, so pretty solid. Citrine, it depends on the build. So if you run her on Dire Thunder, I'd say she's like B tier. I'll put her in low B tier. There's an LTC build where you use her with Astra Storm on Sniper and Radiant Bow to one-shot certain bosses, but outside of that, it wasn't really that good of a build for normal play. And then on Dire Thunder, she's decent. All right, so let's assume this. Let's assume she's either on Dire Thunder or a Thoron nuke. I would say she's like B tier. She's very slow and can't do anything outside of that. She could potentially one-shot things on Thoron nuke with like momentum and then magic plus. This is no DLC, so keep that in mind. So we're not running things like Reprisal and stuff like that. Maybe she is better. Well, here's the problem, though. So even if she could one-shot things, she's a glass cannon, and she can get one-rounded, and she can't enemy phase. So she's also not a bonded target. Like, chain guarding her would be a waste. So there's better units that do this thing. So, all right, so here's one. All right, Ivy I do think is S tier. I put her in A tier in the previous one, but she has similar base magic to Citrine, and a lot of people praise Citrine for her high base magic, but by the time you get Ivy's base magic is usually very close. It's either like plus or minus like 1 to 2 points of magic. So there's really no downside to running Ivy. She is a flying S rank tome, B rank staff, meaning warp and rescue. She's a staff utility who can super Thoron. She can potentially double. She's like medium speed. So with like speed +5, Speed Taker, or Lyn, she can get to doubling pretty consistently. Now, Citrine could potentially double with all these things too, but her base speed is much lower and her speed growth is lower. So she has medium speed, she has low speed. It's easier to take medium speed and get it to double than it is to take low speed and get to double. She also has good bulk. She can tank hits as long as it's not like an archer. and she can enemy phase a little bit, and she also makes a good bonded shield target. So she can actually fly in, kill an enemy, and then tank another enemy pretty easily, and even one-rounded on counterattack in a lot of cases. And she's one of the few units in the game who has access to flying magic, so pretty useful. Zelkov, he's an interesting one. Honestly, I think he is like low A tier. I think his problem is that you can't Master Seal him right away because he's level 17. So in order to Master Seal him, he has to be level 21, I believe. But then if you Master Seal him, I think he doesn't want to be on Thief. He has decent bases. He has good build, strength, and speed, and he has like pretty good average growths. But I think if you could get him on Wyvern or like Hero or like Warrior or Halberdier or something else, he would actually perform much better, because I think daggers are actually a kind of bad weapon in this game for endgame. People always like to point out that their might increases by so much, but they always seem to ignore that the dagger classes have very low base strength. So even when you upgrade daggers, the low base strength of the classes kind of holds it back. And also they're not nearly as good as like lances or axes. And there's no dagger power either, right? Like there's sword, lance, and axe power, and all of which completely enable the current metagame, arguably. But if you just get him to level 21 and then Master Seal him into like a better combat class, I think he can pop off. Now you can run him on Thief, and you can run daggers with something like Lunar Brace, but that's a player phase only thing. Lunar Brace does not work on enemy phase. The only way you could boost his enemy phase damage would be to run something like Roy to get strength increase to boost base strength damage, and then run like strength +5 on Roy, like as a passive, which you could do to get +11 damage. But if you ran Roy with axe power, lance power, sword power, you're looking at +16 damage, so it's debatable. As for like Corrin fog tanking, you can do that, it's fine. Wait, is Unaka? Okay, I was about to say, I'm just making sure Unaka's on here. Alright. Kagetsu. Alright, I think he's... Is he better than these? He's either like... He's like one of these. There's some problems with him. Like he's an S tier unit, but he has some issues that I think we need to go over. Actually, I'll put him below Chloe, to be honest. Alright, I do think he's a little bit worse than Chloe. So, before Well Power, Lance Power... Or Well Power. Before the Well, it was hard to get Lance, Axe, Sword Power. So before the Well, he would be way better than these, for example. But now that the Well is a thing and it's easy to get these damage boosts, these have access to Sword and Lance power early. The earliest power he can get is Axe power. So you can get, like on playthroughs, if you wait to do Anna and Jean's paralog, like if you just... I think you have to beat Chapter 7. You beat Chapter 7, then you go back and do them. You can get 2 extra Tier 4 wells, or at least a Tier 3 well, and then get some extra stuff, Tier 4 well. But if you can get enough Tier 4 wells, you can get like Sword Lance Power 2 to 3 on both of these. And by the time you get him, she'll be insane on Lance Power 2 to 3, and will literally outclass him, but he still is good and can one round consistently. The issue is that he's stuck on Swordmaster for a few chapters. Or you can put him on something else like Paladin or whatever, just temporarily. Long term, I think he wants to be on Wyvern. And the fastest you can get him on Wyvern is Chapter 14. You can get axes. He has sword proficiency. Lucina and Lynn only give swords and I think bows. So he can't get a second weapon to get into Wyvern. He also doesn't have staff to get into Griffin. And Chapter 12... is the first chapter you like really get to use him. You can briefly use him in 11. Chapter 12, he's going to be landlocked on a chapter that wants flyers. So he has a very rough Chapter 12, and he also doesn't really contribute that much because the main threats are very fast Wolf Knights that no one on your team is going to be doubling without Lyn. So that's an issue. And then Chapter 13, he's just okay. It's another chapter where there's like high enemy density. There's like flyers diving you constantly. There's just like threats everywhere, and him being on like Swordmaster, like he doesn't even have that good of damage on Swordmaster. And by the point you get him, you're like all of your engravings are going to be used up unless you hand him somebody else's weapon. So like he's fighting for engravings. He can't really get good passives yet. So he has a rough Chapter 12, a rough Chapter 13, and then after Chapter 13, you can get him axe training from Ike. you can get him on sword, axe, wyvern, and you can hand him the hero's axe and then get axe power and he'll pop off. So once you do that, he'll pop off. But until then, he has like a rocky start, and he's also not on wyvern right away. But he is a good unit once you get him onto something like a better class. Now you can run him on Swordmaster, but you have to like make a build for that, you know. It's not going to be innately good. He wants sword power, but you don't get sword power until very later on. And I'm not so sure his crit damage is high enough that he can one-shot like Panette. But when you get him on something like Wyvern, he can one round pretty consistently. And his speed usually is a little bit lower than hers if she's fed a lot early game. So, and he usually has like a little bit more strength, but she has more speed for the most part. He does have a little bit more build, but usually her build's high enough, her weapons don't weigh her down. Hortensia, I would say she's S tier. She can't use Thoron on her base class, unfortunately, but she can use like L Thunder, L Wind, L Fire for chip damage and debuffing. And then she can be a staff bot. She's one of the best Makai users in the game, just because she has flying repositioning. Now, arguably, you could run Griffin Knight and warp and stuff, because all you have to do is have staff proficiency and you go from C to B rank. Or if you're running Micaiah at a high level, you can get B or A rank from running Micaiah. Micaiah gives you C, B, and A rank in staff use based on your bond level with her. So any flying unit could theoretically do her job, but she's very fast. She is frail though. She can get one shot by a lot of things. So you usually want to run like health increase on her so that if she does get hit, she doesn't die. But if you're just really careful about her positioning, she can just be like a debuff, L Thunder staff bot. Now you can also use her on Sage, which I think is probably, unless you're doing like a bunch of warp skipping, I think Sage is better than her base class, just because it gives her access to Thoron, and then she can actually deal meaningful damage and set up kills and contribute to like killing bosses and things like this. And she can use Bolganone and Thoron now, which is way stronger than L-Fire and L-Thunder. So it depends on what you want out of her, but she's solid on Sage. Same thing with Ivy. You can run Ivy on Sage if you want to run like Siege Byleth or something. But both of them are good on their base class. Both of them are good on Sage. Rosado, I feel like he's here. No, I think he's here. So Rosado on Lances, they give you a bunch of axes, but I think if you give him Lances that aren't too high in build, like too high in weight, he can actually one round, not consistently, but like occasionally. He has kind of low strength for a Wyvern. He has 16 strength on Wyvern, but he does have good strength growth of 45%, plus the 20% of Wyvern, you're looking at 65%. So if he levels up 10 times, that's 6.5 points of strength. So, but the unfortunate thing is, though, I think he's like level 18, like internally. So he's like high internal level, and you get him after chapter 16, so starting with chapter 17. So if you save some paralogs, you can kind of level him up to start to get his strength up to speed. But the main pitfall I've noticed with people using Rosado is they try to keep him on axes. He doesn't have the build for axes unless you're using the Hero's Axe. So what you want to do is get him on lances or give him the Hero's Axe, and then he wants like speed fixing, sword, lance, axe power. Probably lance power if you can get it, because after chapter 17 you can get lance power again. But he does have potential, and kind of like Boucheron, he has like he's like medium high speed, but he's not high speed. So he needs more speed fixing than like these to one round. But he's like similar to Boucheron. He has like strength issues, but he has enough speed to justify investing in him to get him to one round. So there's some potential there. All right, Goldmary, I think she's like A tier. I think a lot of people overhype her, to be honest. Like, she's a good unit, but every time I use her, and I've used her on multiple runs, she has a rocky start for like 5 chapters. It takes her a while before she can one round anything, and she literally needs speed wings to one round things, or Lyn. Like, if you need Lyn to one round things, you're not S tier. Like, because Lyn is like the best speed fixing thing in the game. And if you require that to even be relevant, that's a problem. But in all my runs, I've had to feed her all of the speed wings to get her to double and run like speed +5. so she needs like a ton of speed fixing. But when you do speed fix her, she's a great hero. You can also run her on general. I think Jade is actually better on general. I could be wrong. Well, actually, no, I don't think I am, because by the time she's on general, her defense isn't high enough. Whereas Jade could be like 30 plus defense. I think Gold Mary's only like 25, 26 or something, maybe 27. But she's definitely not as good. She's a better hero than this is a general. And I've run builds on her where her hero pops off, but she does need speed wings, so it's kind of debatable. On general, maybe she's like down. Maybe she's like here. Like medium. Tamara. Honestly, I think she's high S. Like, I think she's up there. So many people talk so much trash about Tamara, but even on stream, I just started using her late, and she's like one rounding things on enemy phase with speed +3 on Ike. She tanks even when Ike isn't even active. Like, she's like naturally fast and tanky. Her only problem is her build, and even then, you can get her speed up through passives that she can still double on most things. If you hand her a light weapon, she'll always double, and she can one round on enemy phase with Javelin, with the Well Lance, with the Hero's Lance, with a Steel Lance, in some cases a Silver Lance if it's upgraded and has the right engraving on it. But she's effortlessly one of the best tanks in the game, and she's not even meant to one round things, but she can easily be enabled to do so. So, like in every single time I use her, she pops off with like almost no investment. So it's pretty good return. Marin, I do think, is S tier. She is very similar to Kagetsu. When you put them both on Wyvern, their stats are almost exactly the same, except he has like 2 or 3 more points of strength. Like their build, their speed, their dex, like everything. He just has like slightly higher stats in like health, and I think like in strength. She has the better passive of the two because it affects any females within range. And hit and avoid stacking is always useful. You know, fixing bad hit rates is always helpful, even if it's slightly, like a slight increase. And increasing avoid in a game where, you know, dodging is good and avoid stacking is good is very nice. I actually prefer her for her passive, like especially if I'm trying to run avoid tanks, because then it just bumps them up a little bit more for free. And it has 2 range, which is crazy. And it also affects herself. He gives himself hit +10, essentially. She gives everything around her. So the cost of 2 less damage, she gives everything around her that's female, +5 hit and avoid. And I think that is stronger. But he does have the better combat. She doesn't have the rocky start he has, because as soon as you get her, she can go into Wyvern. But you do get her later, so. But he's not really putting in work on chapter 12 and 13, usually. Panette. I'll put her like here. So she basically wants to be on like a crit build. I feel like she's not the best enemy phaser. She has enemy phase builds, but I feel like the enemy phase builds that people run on her, like outside of the one where you run crit bow and crit axe, and you need 2 engravings, and you keep Leaf at bond level 4, so she switches between them. I think that's probably her best enemy phase build. But outside of that, I feel like Ike is better at enemy phasing. I might even bump her down. Honestly, I feel like she's like here. I feel like Kagetsu's better overall because he's a better bond target, I think. Now she can one-shot crit, but you have like the thing is I feel like people don't acknowledge that it's better to just fly up to things and just kill them for free than to set up crits, even if it just takes you a turn. Like, and then you also have to play around your dancer healing her away. You have to play around all your quality time units healing away her bonus crits from Wrath and from her passive. And honestly, like a lot of times I feel like it's annoying and it like gets in the way. When it works, it's amazing. But when your quality times and your dancer accidentally heal away her lost health, it can be quite annoying to play around. Now, a lot of people like to put Ike on her. I do think she's an S tier for sure. Like in terms of combat, she definitely has better combat than Marin, and her combat's probably about the same as Kagetsu, who can just one round without the crit setup. But he's probably he's a better bonded shield target. He's a better enemy phaser for the most part. He has higher base speed, so people like to put her in S tier because she one shots things, but her speed is low, so she gets doubled more consistently from other enemies, and that is a problem. And you're not going to be doubling with her, and her builds don't really need it. They basically just want to one-shot things. but I value high speed. So unless you're doing like aggressive play only, like she's definitely, her enemy phasing isn't as good as some of these other units. Like these have better enemy phasing than her for sure. Especially her, she's like the enemy phase queen of the game, to be honest. And if you don't agree with that, like just try running her on Ike. Like some people say he can be like perform similarly on Ike. I don't know what class though. Maybe like Great Knight, because her defense value is like 25 or something. Like it gets really high on Picket, like as you enter, like as you're in the middle game with her. And his on Wyvern was like, I don't know, 14 or something. So I don't know, I don't see it. But yeah, like she can one-shot things, she can Brave Axe, she can Crit Axe, she can Tomahawk, she can even Crit Tomahawk on enemy phase, if you want to use like a secondary crit engraving that isn't being used. She can run that as well. She can also be on General, she can be on Warrior. To some degree, she can be on Wyvern, and it still works. I ran a crit Wyvern build on my flyer only run. It worked pretty well. She can't enemy phase nearly as well as a lot of the other fast units, but she can still, her player phasing is so strong, and she does have enemy phase builds. I don't really find them enjoyable to use. Like, I don't like Vantage builds because you have to fix health so much, and I don't like fixing health because then as soon as you quality time accidentally, or Sadal is just within 2 tiles, you heal away your Vantage, which is just annoying. So personally, I think it's too much trouble to deal with. I don't like complex systems. I'd rather have a simple thing that always works than some complex thing that has more points of failure. So you could argue she goes up if you just don't mind that. Fagato, honestly, I think he's like here. I think he's high A tier. He has really good base stats. He has really good growth rates. He's fast. He has a good build. He can be a good warrior. He can be a good Cupido. And yeah, he's just a solid unit. He's just a solid physical unit. He's an example of one of the many units that like just outshines Etier on Warrior. Like this would outshine her. This would outshine her. This would outshine her. This would outshine her. This outshine. Like so many units just eclipse this unit. This is why she's low. All right, Pandreo. Honestly, he's like one of the best units in the game. He might even be the best unit in the game. Let me think about this. Is he better than Alir? So if Alir is bondage shielding and you're not doing LTC or warp skipping, this is what I'm assuming, because most people don't do that. Like some people warp skip just like endgame maps, but most people don't warp skip, and most people don't LTC. So is he the best unit in the game, the best combat unit? I don't think so, honestly. I think he's like here. Is he worse than Chloe though? So Kagetsu has a rocky start. Pandreo kind of doesn't as much, but he doesn't like kill it right away either. By the time you get these, she's already one-rounding most things, and her build is mostly made. Like you can get her speed +3 and like lance power 2 to 3 super early, and she can just one-round almost anything on Wyvern. And then as you scale the lance power and the speed, she just continues to one-round things. Even without an engraving or an emblem ring, keep in mind. So I feel like he takes some time to get started. I feel like these take more time to get started than people want to acknowledge. He's not one-rounding things right away. Neither is he. They take a few chapters before they get online fully. But people like to compare them to other units because by the time you get these, she's already built. And so can she be. Like both of these can be completely built with like sword and lance power, and then like speed plus by the time you even can run these. So like there's a huge advantage of getting in early because you get that access to Roy and Sigurd that I don't think people mention enough. But I do think he's up there. I don't think they're that much better. Once they're all like going, they're all like once you're fast enough and you one-run enemies, they're basically like on the same playing field, right? He might have a better passive than her, and actually this passive's better. This is a better passive. This is one of the best passives in the game. His passive is definitely weaker than these two because his can scale him to crazy hit avoid rates, and hers is just +2 true damage, which is better than +10 hit on a unit who doesn't miss anyways. So I think they're all very similar though, and I think these are like these like top 4 to 5 are all like kind of similar. They all have some startup. I feel like people like to overlook the startup costs of their favorite units, to be honest. I'll be honest with you about this. I think that's the case. All right, Cooking Man. I'm not gonna say his name even off stream. I have to waste a pulse when I'm streaming as part of my chaotic stream. When I say his name, so I'm just gonna always call him Cooking Man just to be safe. All right, Cooking Man. He's like here, I think. I think he has like worse res than her. He might be. Oh, maybe you're here. Let me move some dudes around. Maybe you're like here. Maybe you're like here. Yeah. All right. Let's move them into B tier. I mean, these are better than these. Let's be honest. Like these have good defensive bulk, decent strength. They can, as long as they have a hit increase, they can use great weapons. I do think she's better than them. I'm pretty sure she has much higher res than him as well. They can all run like she's on axes too, so like axe power with the hit engraving. That's like your best case. You could second seal him into axes, and then he is on Great Knight, so he would either need to be switched into general or you just run him on Great Knight with axe power potentially. I don't think it would be as good as this though. It could be. I'd have to test it, but maybe these are A tier. We'll have to see. But I think he's like he's very similar to Louis in terms of stats. But I think Jade's res, her higher res is better. If he does have higher res, let me know. I'm pretty sure he doesn't though. I'm just going off of memory. All right, Dancer. Where do I want to put Dancer? I'll put it here. I'll put him in medium C or S tier. So because enemy phasing is so strong in this game, it can outperform Dancer, but Dancer is just free advantage. That's just pure upside. Like you just use it and you just get extra stats from refreshing. You get free chip healing. You get another chain guarder. So like he has a lot he can bring to the table. He also generates his own XP. So there's really no reason to not run him unless you're doing like low unit count for like a challenge or something. But even then, like on my 7-man run, I'd use him because I have 5 combat hard carries, utility staff bot, bonded Fram, and then a dancer with I think Corrin actually just to freeze things. So he can like freeze things in case I'm in the bad position or something, then canter out. But he has quality time, canter, and then, or maybe he's not on Corrin, maybe he's on something else. But quality time and canter are really good on him, so he can reposition and be safe. He also has high speed and can tank a hit. He technically can be okay on some other classes, but it's usually a waste to put him on those. But easy S tier, free unit, free utility. Jean, I think he's like here. Honestly, I think he's like mid A tier. I think a lot of and this is just using him as is. Like a lot of people undervalue how good staff users are, I think, and he is a free staff bot that can chain guard. In early game, if you use him and Fram, you can attack positions more aggressively because you can move in, kill something, and then either heal the unit that took some damage, or if they didn't, you can chain guard them so they can then tank an enemy on enemy phase, and then you can continue pushing forward. So chain guarding actually enables aggression, and it allows you to stay in a position. So having 2 chain guarders early is very useful, and throughout a run, he'll just level himself up. You can throw a utility on emblem on him long term, but in the short term, he can just heal and chain guard, and it's very useful. It allows you to tank anything. You know, an enemy can deal 1,000 damage, and you'll take 0 from chain guard. He'll just take 10 or 20% of his max HP. So just as is, A tier. Now, if you want to run him on a combat class, like a combat carry, you're going to have to go heavy investment, Micaiah, maybe some XP farm. But it's an early startup cost, and at the point of the game where the game is easy, it is farming. I don't recommend or advocate for XP farming. I feel like it kind of breaks the game too much. But if you get him to level 10 very quickly early on from some kind of like staff farming or something, he can be one of the best combat units in the game. On like he actually could be one of the best warriors in the game. He can be like a really good wyvern. Definitely a better. I think he's actually 50% speed growth on wyvern because he's 40% at base plus 10% because he doubles the modifiers, and on wyvern he'd be 60% strength growth. So he could potentially be like one of the best in most roles. But that requires a lot of early investment in XP farming, and if you're grinding early XP, then some of these might move up. Potentially, but not really. So I think as is, he's just A tier, and then if you want to invest in him early as a combat carry, he could move up to S. I think Anna is similar. Anna, like, so I'm putting, if it weren't for their investment, they'd be an S. But if you invest in her on, like, even if you do like low investment, you just have her attack things, use Micaiah to level up to 10 slowly without any extra effort. She will hit level 10. You can throw her on Warrior. She can use Radiant Bow. That's like the low investment. Alternatively, if you want her to be a hard carry, you can train her up early on Micaiah, like as soon as you get her. Just like, intentionally letting some enemies hit you, getting a little bit extra healing XP, getting her to level 10 as fast as possible before like chapter 8 to 9, and then put her on like Mage Knight or Sage and she can pop off. But this is assuming you use her as a hard carry, because I think what people do is they tend to distribute XP too evenly. You don't want to do that. You want to have like 4 to 5 units that always kill things. And there's really no disadvantage for doing this. You don't want to have like 8 combat units. You want like 5, and then the rest of your units can deal chip damage, clean up kills, or be utilities, like staff bot utilities, chain guard utilities, dancer utility, debuff. You could have units like that use Thoron, like sages that just use Thoron with Corrin debuff or quality time or canter. Like you can have those units, and then they could, like 2 of those can get a kill. So you can have like 2 dudes use a Thoron, get a kill, stuff like that. But you shouldn't be running like 8 hard carries where you're feeding them all XP evenly, because it's just going to make it so it's harder for all of them to get kills consistently. Even units like Kagetsu, like if you don't feed him enough, he's not going to pop off. Like no units, every unit needs a good amount of XP to consistently kill. So if they don't get that, they're not going to be good. All right, Yunaka. I'll put her here. Maybe Amber's lower. Let's move him down. Let's say he's low A tier. These can both avoid stack on Thief. She has better res though. One of the main weaknesses of Thief is that enemy mystics completely ignore your avoid bonuses, including the Thief passive that doubles the avoid bonus on terrain. So having higher res and speed means that she usually doesn't get doubled by mages. And if she gets hit, she takes less damage. She also has better res growth than him, but he has higher strength and build. So I view these as like the same tier. She also has the plus crit on avoid tiles. He has the minus incoming hit. Avoid tanking in general is kind of suspect, because in order for enemies to attack you, they have to be able to hit you. And 5% connect in this game. So if you're doing like an Iron Man, do not rely on avoid tanking. If you're allowing pulses, then knock yourself out. It can be really good. But it runs into some problems where certain enemies will always never be able to hit you, so they'll ignore you. And then other enemies that are substantially more accurate will attack you and potentially hit you. Like 10 to 20% hit rates. If 5 things attack you, you're probably getting hit. And some endgame enemies one-shot these units, or at the very least deal insane amounts of damage to them. Saphir's interesting. She has 24 strength, but that's not really good, right? That's like Panette at base warrior, but you get her so late. So I'll put her like low, maybe high B tier. I'll put her high B tier. Her strength is like 24 on warrior. That's literally Panette at base, and that's Amber by the time you get Panette if you use him. So she's worse than Amber. I would say she's high B tier. Her passive's whatever. It's kind of hard to play around. Her speed is medium, so it's hard for her to double. Her build is pretty good. She's some of the best build in the game, but ultimately, unless you seriously speed fix her, she's not going to be doubling many things. Linden, I think he's like A tier. He has a really good passive. He has a passive that enables crits on a lot of different weapon types. Any killer weapon type, like late game, like the way his passive works, he gets crit plus 20 when he's using a lower rank weapon, and most enemies have high rank weapons like silver and so on. So when he's using a C rank killer weapon, or even just like a tome, like Dire Thunder, people run Dire Thunder crit on him if you like create that ring. But even just C rank weapons, he can consistently get his crit modifier, and he has a bunch of different interesting builds. Now, he is kind of like a late starter. He's like one of those units you get very late, so as you're entering the end game. So it's debatable as to how much you want to, like, how many resources you want to dump into him. So, or how many resources are even available. Because by the time you get him, all of your engravings are used, typically, especially if you're running other crit builds. So, depending on what team comp you have, I generally don't team comp around like units like Saphir or Linden. If I do use them, they're just like filler. So maybe I just leave them on Thoron, upgrade it a few times, like to like +2 or something, and just call it a day, and just have him be a staff bot that can Thoron. That's like one of the best low effort builds for units, because like Thoron does enough damage that it usually will do like 30 to 50% of something's health. And you could also throw Bolganon on him if you want him to go for one rounding like armors, which is always useful because there's always armors. All right, Veil. She is a lot better than people think. If you change her into something else, she's actually quite good. I would say she's like here. Her availability is really the reason why she's mid. If her availability was better, she'd probably be S. She actually has quite good speed when you put her on like Griffin. I think it's like 27 base. But the thing is, by the time you get her, you're on like chapter, like by the time you can actually change her build, you're on chapter 23. So so it's not, the availability is terrible. And chapter 23, hold on, let me remember what that is. Oh yeah, that's the lava field map. Chapter 23, there's a lot of fast enemies, there's a lot of reinforcement spam, there's a lot of like flyers and wolf knights and really fast things. So 27 speed is not fast enough to double those things. So she needs like speed taker, speed +5, or some serious speed fixing to double anything. And even so, like the enemy griffins and wolf knights are like 37 speed or something. So 27 speed would be great in mid game, but because you get her so late, she's just like a mid A tier in my opinion. She's a free unit with good stats. That's really why she's an A tier. And her availability is a blessing and a curse because she has 2500 SP, which is good. And you can easily get her some, a few good passives for free without the well. But you don't get to use her for very long. And enemies are very fast in the end game. So she's not going to be doubling things without help. Mavier, I think he's like similar. If you put him on something else, like I think he doesn't want to be on Royal Knight. Unfortunately, Flame Lance is kind of a meme. It's just statistically worse than Levin Sword in terms of weight and damage. So it's just kind of like this weird, like weak weapon that it should hit way harder and maybe be like 1 or 2 points less of weight, and then it would be amazing. But unfortunately, it's incredibly weak for no reason. And the devs don't seem to want to do balance changes or anything like that, so we're stuck with it. But if you put him on something else similar to Veil, he has pretty good bases, pretty good growth rates actually. But you're not going to be able to take advantage of growth rates on either of these units. They're going to level up a few times before the game is over. So you just don't really have an option. Like you can't like go power level them unless you saved a bunch of paralogs. And even then, if you saved a bunch of paralogs, they're potentially too high of a level to benefit from that because paralog enemies aren't the highest level. All right, so let's do the DLC units, but within base game. So they're going to be higher level, right? Wait, we don't have Nell and Nil or Rafal and all them. We just have these because these are like the bosses. These are like literally the bosses. I thought this one had all of them. All right, I'll just say it. All right, so she's S tier. They're high levels. She's very similar to Chloe, potentially even better than Chloe. Maybe like here. She might be one of the best combat units in the game. I think he's like low A. He's some builds. She probably like with the other tanks, I want to say. And then the other two, Nell is here. She's high S. And then Rafal is also high S. It's like similar to like Panat, but he has better stats, so that's crazy. Sorry, so this is for base game. So even though these are DLC units, you can still just beat the Xenologue and not do any paralogs or get any like divine paralogs or get any of the bracelets. So this is the tier list currently. I'm just going to look it over really quick just to see if I want to move anyone. Let's see. I think this looks good so far. Yeah, I'm pretty happy with this. I don't really want to move anyone around. I feel like these just suffer from startup problems. Like, these are just rough to use long term. This just is like Anna, but without the payoff. Because ultimately, he just becomes like a Fagato. So you have to really overinvest in him early, and then he's basically just like a worse Fagato. but it's like, just wait until you get Figado. It's the same thing, but it's free. And then these, I feel like, have some potential. Like B tier, you know, this is still like, these are still usable, good units. Like this is like good. This is like great. This is like amazing. These are like okay. This is like kind of bad. I am technically violating the Vander Constitution right now. It's from my live stream. You probably have no idea what the hell I'm talking about. But that's it for this one. Definitely like and subscribe if you enjoyed this. We also have channel membership. So it's $5 a month. You get a cool little badge that evolves over time that gets cooler as time goes on, and you have access to like the channel, the members section, the VIP members only, as well as little emotes that are fun that you can use in comments or during live stream. But yeah, that's it for this one. Thanks for checking this out. Peace.